friends, continuing with our video audit strategy planning and programming. In this video we are going to cover the rest of the questions. Question 1 to question number 8. 9th to 13 has already been covered. Now coming to the first question, friends, if you see, the answer to the first question is huge. It's humongous, and chances are very rare that such questions will be asked in your CA finals. Okay, what at max what they can do is they can ask you some subparts of this question, of this answer, sorry. So what you should do is that you should just go and just give a reading. Okay, just simply go ahead and give a reading. That's it. I think you don't have to put too much of effort or too much of brains into the first question. Coming to the second question, write short notes on the following: walkthrough test and cutoff procedure. I think we all must be knowing it. We have already studied the same in the IPCC as well. वॉक थ्रू टेस्ट में क्या होता है, स्टार्ट से लेके एंड तक सिस्टमेटिक तरीके से ओके चेकिंग आउट द प्रोसेसेस दैट आर बीइंग फॉलोड बाय एन एंटिटी, उसको वॉक थ्रू टेस्ट कहा जाता है, स्टार्ट से लेके यानी कि इनिशिएशन से एंड तक. दैट इज व्हाट यू हैव टू, दैट इज व्हाट इज वॉक थ्रू टेस्ट in a layman's language. Now this is something which we cannot put in our papers, right? So what you have to write is that a walkthrough is a procedure in which an auditor traces a transaction from its initiation. Let me give you a quick tip, friends. In many of the papers, this is a feedback from the examiners as well. They say that what they look for is they're looking for the keywords. Okay, for example, many of the students will write that a walkthrough is a procedure in which an auditor traces a transaction from its start to the end. Now you might get marks for the same, but then the chances are not very high, okay? Because what they're looking for is they're looking for the for the keywords. So if you write initiation, okay, it's gonna catch their eyes easily. So because that is what is written in the suggested answers as well, which they get, जिसको रेफर करके हमारे कॉपीज जो होते हैं वो चेक किया जाता है. So walkthrough is a procedure in which an auditor traces a transaction from its initiation through the company's information system to the point when it is reflected in the financial report. The auditor should perform one walkthrough at a minimum for each major class of transaction. Now, a walkthrough provides evidence to confirm that the auditor understands what? Three things. एक तो क्या है, जो ट्रांजैक्शन से उनके प्रोसेस फ्लो. सेकंड, द डिजाइन ऑफ द आइडेंटिफाइड कंट्रोल्स. थर्ड, whether all the points in the process have been identified at which misstatements related to the relevant financial statement assertion could occur. Now when performing a walkthrough, auditor को चार चीजें याद रखनी पड़ेगी. Now let me tell you, this can be asked as a standalone question. Okay, so what are the four things that you need to remember while performing a walkthrough? Be sure that the walkthrough encompasses the complete process. Second, ask the entity's personnel at each of the key stage in the process about the understanding of what the company's prescribed procedure require. Determine, third point, determine whether processing procedures are performed as expected. And number 4 is evaluate the quality of evidence provided. Okay, auditor should follow the whole process and using the same documentation and technology that the company staff use, asking questions of different personnel at each significant stage and asking follow-up questions as well. Now once a walkthrough is performed, the auditor may carry forward the documentation noting update unless significant changes make preparation of new documentation more efficient. The auditor should determine whether it is necessary to work through transactions that were processed both before and after the change. ओके, सो जो हम वेरिएशन करते हैं ना, तो स्टैंडर्ड डेविएशन, देन वेरिएशन, सो दोज थिंग्स आर अप्लाइड ओवर हियर एज वेल, but in the auditor's way. Now next we also have something called the cutoff procedure as well. I think most of us would be aware of it, at least in this stage. Cutoff procedure means procedures employed to ensure the separation of transaction at the end of 1 year from those in the commencement of the next year. Usually the problem of overlapping is found in inventory accounting, since quite often goods are sold but passed on to the buyer only after the year is over, or goods are bought but received only after the close of the year. The situation may create considerable problem for the proper stock taking of inventory. Okay, now the auditor should satisfy himself by examination and Test check that these procedures adequately ensure two things: goods purchased for which property has passed to the client have in fact been included in inventories, and that the liability, if any, has been provided for. Second, goods sold have been excluded from the inventories and credit has been taken for the sales. The auditor may examine a sample of documents evidencing the movement of stock into and out of the stores, including documents pertaining to periods shortly before and shortly after the cutoff date, and check whether the stocks represented by those documents were included or excluded as appropriate during the stock taking. Okay. Next comes the designing and audit strategies, the backbone of the audit planning process. Discuss. Actually, let me tell you, generally what you have to do is, it's very difficult, rather impossible to remember every word in toto. Okay, so generally, you have to remember these subheadings: obtaining knowledge of business, performing analytical procedures, evaluating inherent risk, evaluating internal control, because believe you me, these are what the examiners generally check. Now if you are writing these things correctly, okay, these things correctly, you will be getting marks. Believe me, you will be getting marks. So make sure that these wordings means the subheadings, they don't go wrong. Rest explanations can be in your words. Okay, anyway, it's very difficult to remember everything in toto, as I said. So first thing is that you need to obtain the knowledge of the business. You have to give the reference to essay 315 and essay 330. Okay, so knowledge of the business is the frame of reference within which the auditor exercises professional judgment. Understanding the business and using this information appropriately assists the auditor in assessing risk and identifying problem, planning and performing the audit effectively and efficiently. It also ensures that the audit staff assigned to an audit engagement obtain sufficient knowledge of the business to enable them to carry out the audit work delegated to them. ये आप अपने words में लिख सकते हो, कोई issue नहीं है. Performing analytical procedure. The process of analytical procedure at the planning stage is attention directing, corroborating is not normally necessary at this stage. The use of the analytical procedure during the planning stage requires that the extensive use of accounting and business knowledge and experience to assess the potential for material misstatement in the financial statement as a whole, because the key aspect of the task is to identify the relevant risk indicators and to interpret them properly. Then evaluate the inherent risk. Okay, to assess the inherent risk, the auditor you would use professional judgment to evaluate numerous factors: quality of accounting system, unusual pressure on management, etc., having regard to his experience of the entity from previous audit engagement of the entity, any control established by the management to compensate for a high level of inherent risk, and his knowledge of any significant changes which might have taken place since his last assessment. Now let me tell you, his knowledge of any significant changes, this point is very important. Okay, you have to be alert to any significant changes. Okay, so ये point अपने copy में ज़रूर लिख के आना. Then of course you have to evaluate the internal control. Okay, the auditor's assessment of the control environment is crucial to the decision on whether to make an extended assessment control. This is because a good control environment is conducive to the maintenance of a reliable system of accounting and control procedure. Now the auditor needs an understanding of the accounting system regardless of whether the audit strategy will involve an extended assessment of the internal internal accounting controls. This is done by these two points: considering the results of gathering or updating information about the client and making preliminary judgment about materiality, inherent risk and control effectiveness. We'll continue the rest of the questions in the next video.